I timed this message yesterday morning at 30 minutes. I didn't leave time for emotional moments or anything else, so I think it's going to go longer today, but just kind of give you a time frame where we're at. I need to find the seniors. Last time I talked to a group within a group, I forgot to find who it was I was talking to, and I realized at the end I never saw any of them. I couldn't find them. So seniors, I'm sorry, but just go ahead and stand up real quick for me. Seniors, stand up. Sit down, Q-Tip. I need to see where you are so I can either talk to you or I can avoid your faces. Alright. This will work. I'm going to talk this way. We'll do this. This is going to be okay. The end of the year is a good time to reflect. It's a good time for nostalgia. It's a good time to look back on where we've been and where we've come from. It's also a good time to be fed. Senior receptions are great, aren't they? You show up, stick around for about 40-45 minutes. You see some familiar faces. You see some complete strangers. And then you go to that buffet table. And the food there, I mean, there's some good stuff there. You got some food there that you end up just loving and you keep going back for more. And you got some food that's, but maybe not your favorite, but maybe somebody else loves that food there. But hopefully what ends up happening is that you go and you eat and you're fed and you leave full and satisfied. And it's those two ideas that have inspired me to bring you a message this morning, kind of like a buffet. We're going to touch on a lot of different topics, and my hope is that for each of you, there's at least one thing this morning that you really like and that you're able to cling to and that you're able to walk out of here satisfied. It's kind of like, you've got a TV show that you love and you watch and you're dedicated to it every week, and you wait for that next episode to come out. And it finally comes out, especially out here, you wait a couple days to download it or a couple hours to stream it, and then you get there, and it's one of those clip shows that's all review. Kind of like every other episode of American Idol, that kind of thing. I hope it's still beneficial for you, but today's going to be one of those clip shows. I'm going to take you back to 2007. That is the first time that I spoke to you seniors. You were in 7th grade, and it was my first year here. I was a 5th grade teacher, and my wife and I were doing that obligatory testimony time where we just introduce ourselves to you. I didn't know you, you didn't know me, we were brand new. Yadu was there, Aaron Bradbury, Jeremy Chin, Johnny Hampton, Etienne, Rudy O, John Lagerstedt, Anushrit, Hameen, and Emily. You probably don't remember, but when I came up that afternoon in chapel, I was limping. And the reason that I was limping was because a couple of days before, while playing handball, somebody hurt my finger. And so I limped. And the reason I limped is because I kind of wanted the attention. And, I want people to say, well, what's wrong with you? And it's also because I wanted to make it obvious that I had an excuse for anything that wasn't quite as good as it could have been. So, you know that something's wrong, it's because my fingers hurt. And then I told you that that tendency to make excuses is something that I have done my entire life. And I am a pastor's kid. I grew up in the church. And so my testimony is that when I was young, it really didn't matter if I was a Christian because I was a pastor's kid. And that's all it took. Everybody assumed I was fine because of who my father was. And I told you that after high school I went to a Christian college, and now I was a Wheaton kid. And I didn't really have to be a Christian because I went to Wheaton. And then I taught at a Christian school, and then I went out to Cote d'Ivoire, and then I came here, and my entire life I've had these labels that have pretty much given me the ability to kind of skate by and not really have to worry about, my actual faith, just because on the surface, you guys can just assume that I am a Christian and I don't have to do anything else. I warned you that having that label is worthless if you don't have the faith to back it up. Because the one who knows me the best can see right through all those labels. And so I tried, starting in high school, late high school, college, to make my personal walk more mine, take it more seriously, and not hinge my reputation on my title, but instead on my actual relationship with the Father. And I challenge you to try to do the same, to watch out for your MK cards and your DA student cards and your I'm going to a Christian college next year cards, or your whatever else it is. Be careful of those, especially you seniors, when you go to where you're going next. No one's going to be forcing you to go to church anymore. It's really nice to be able to sleep in on Sunday mornings. It's really tempting. There's going to be nobody forcing you. And so you've got to take that seriously, and you've got to make a real attempt on your own to make your faith your faith. Even if it's hard to find a church that feels like this one. It's hard to find worship that's like DA. It's hard to find speakers that are nearly as handsome or humble as DA speakers. Keep at it. Don't give up. Somehow, I didn't speak again for another couple of years. I don't know if it's that I didn't do a good job or I just escaped the list, but it wasn't again until your freshman year that I spoke to you again. And by now, Hala and Miranda had joined. Aaron Demars, Gloria, Emma, Sekou, Seth, and Kayla. You are all here. Jeremy, I think, was gone, maybe on furlough. But the rest of you were here as well. And that time when I spoke, I talked about things that I learned the hard way. And I showed you a book that I've written called Things I've Learned the Hard Way. And it's a children's book. It has pictures. And some of the things that I've learned the hard way are that hamsters don't fly. Rest in peace. I learned that geese don't make the best pets. I've learned that horses can run faster than humans and that they bite. I've learned that even if a BB gun seems really, really weak, it still really, really hurts when you shoot yourself in the foot with it. And I've learned that umbrellas are not the same thing as parachutes. But another thing that I learned the hard way growing up was, and I confess this to you, I told you that there are times when I wish that people didn't know that I was a Christian. I wish that there were times when I could have a break. Because there are times in my life where I felt that the title that I have and the reputation that I have, and it is a burden to uphold. It's a job for me sometimes. And now, of course, being a Christian should be the defining thing about you. It should be the very first thing. I am a C, I am a CH. That should be it. And yet there are times when I felt like God deserved a better representative. And I've heard that line, and you all have too, the person who says, I'm not a Christian because I know too many. And I felt like that guy sometimes. And so I confess that there are times when I want to take a break. But then I told you that that's a very, very dangerous mentality to have. For a couple of really major reasons. One is that if you take a break, your sin nature, or Satan, can grab a foothold in your life, and you can go down a very slippery slope, and it can be very, very hard to return from that. Taking a break is dangerous. The second thing is you never know who you might impact, either good or bad, in your life. God brings about circumstances and opportunities in our lives that we cannot predict. And what happens if you're on a break for one of those? Now, God is sovereign, and He's going to work out His purposes whether we're involved or not. But wouldn't you rather be involved? I met Brad 13 years ago at ICA, Brad Trozen. And I was student teaching there. I was a nobody. I was a college kid just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was there for about 3 months, and it was one of the evacuations at ICA. It wasn't one of the major ones, but it was one. We had to leave, and we had to kind of scramble. So one day we're there, the next day we're packing up and we're leaving. I'm just a temp. I'm nobody. But on my way out, ICA had made enough of an impression on me that I wanted to get some mementos and take some things with me. And I talked to Brad, and he had those Sing and Wail tapes. They were cassette tapes at the time. And on his last day, as a dorm dad, while he's trying to get everybody else packed up and ready to go, he took the time to find one of those tapes. He actually had to record one, dub it so that I had one to go. He took the time to sit down and have a tie with me and a few other people. And then I left, not knowing if I would ever see SCA or Brad or any of those people again. I went back to college. I finished my senior year, and that was about in October. And then February of that year, I was sitting in a closet, literally a closet in my house. There wasn't room for all of us to live there, so my room was a closet. I was sitting there, and I was kind of doing homework, but I was also just kind of praying and thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I don't really want to stay in Chicago. I don't really want to go to Oregon. And I was playing that tape, and Fungabot came on, Power in the Blood, and it was like, it was one of those moments, it's like, why not go back? What's stopping you from returning to Africa? It was one of the few times in my life where I feel like a definitive, boom, this is what I'm doing now. And because of that moment, and then of course because of that tape, and because Brad wasn't on a break that last day that I saw him, I'm here, now. Because that started all of it. You know what? Brad was on a break. Maybe God would have, in His sovereignty, allowed a different way, but now Brad gets to be part of my story. That's great. And so I'm really happy about that. And I'm going to miss you. What if, this will be the hard part, what if JP was on a break? The day that I called frantically from the island and told him that Carrie had fallen and we needed help. But he wasn't. He answered the phone and he came running. What if Judy was on a break the day that I learned from her that chewing gum, despite everything I've been taught about public speaking, that chewing gum helps you push back down the tears when you're emotional. So thanks for that, I appreciate it. So don't go on a break. But also know that when you fail, when you fall short, when you aren't the perfect ambassador of Christ, He is a forgiving God. He is a gracious and merciful God. We talked that time about sanctification, about that big theological word. The inward spiritual process whereby God brings about holiness and change in the life of a Christian by means of the Holy Spirit. It's a continuing process. It's something it's a lifelong journey. And so we need to have that in mind throughout our lives, that we are continually being sanctified and becoming more like Christ. During that chapel, I apologized to non-Christians in the audience, and I said, I'm sorry for the times when I have not lived up to the reputation I should have. And please don't hold me against Christ and the truth of Him. And then I took another year off. And I didn't talk to you again your sophomore year. And I waited until your junior year, last year. And Debbie Amuo came, Ben and Caleb Anderson, Maddie, Akini, Ben Helm, Luke Little, Aditya, Charity, Andy, Nicole, Ian, Matthew, Keenan, Jin, and Isaac. You were all here last year. And the class is almost full. And last year I talked to you about the idea of a me monster. And I just found out this week that I owe some of you an apology as a result of that message. Last year, I confessed that last year's senior class was really special to me, and that I was really having a hard time preparing for them to leave. And this was like in February, which is kind of, it's a long way to go. But I was just telling them how sad that I was that they were leaving. And in the process, I offended a lot of you. I'm really sorry about that. It was one of those complinsults where I tried to compliment one group and I insulted a bunch of others. So I'm really sorry about that. And I hope you guys know by now how much you mean to me and that I'm going to miss you guys like crazy too. I do apologize. Please, please, please forgive me. I confessed during that message that, well, actually we talked about where do you find your worth? That was kind of the topic. Where do you find your worth? How do you find value in your own life? And I confess that a lot of my worth is tied up in what people think of me. And so last year's senior class kind of liked me, and that was really fun for me, and I enjoyed that, and it made me feel special. And I feel like some of you guys like me again this year, and that makes me feel good about myself, and I feel valuable and worthwhile. But that's not really where our worth should come from. We talked about a psychological term called conversational narcissism. And that's kind of the me monster idea. It's where you start a conversation and then someone else joins in and they try to take the topic and shift it towards themselves. So for example, Joseph Yoon limps up with his cast and he says, "I broke my leg." But then Uncle David Walker shows up, he says, "Yeah, well, that ain't nothing. I had a cast for a couple weeks. And my injury has been going on forever, and it still isn't going away, and I might have to go to the States and maybe surgery." And then Maggie shows up and says, "Well, that ain't nothing. I broke my arm, and I was out the entire basketball season, and I got my cast off the day after the last game." And then Caleb Anderson shows up and says, "That ain't nothing. I jumped over the deep to a wall, and my femur popped out." And then I show up, of course, and say, "That ain't nothing. In 2007, I was playing handball. Someone hurt my finger, and I had to limp." It's all about me. And we do this all the time. It's never on purpose, probably never on purpose, but we do it all the time. And so I encourage you to avoid the me monster, suppress the me monster, because the me monster is craving that attention and craving that value, but it's more important to find our worth in other places. Find our identity in the things that are permanent and in the things that are eternal. Our identity should be based on the characteristics that we have because of our relationship with Christ. Because of Jesus, you are God's child. You are justified. You are a part of the body of Christ. You are anointed, blessed, chosen, adopted, holy, redeemed, forgiven, included. You are God's workmanship. You are secure, victorious, blameless, free, protected, delivered, and qualified. Now say that back to me. Go ahead.
Qualified.
Say one of them. You remember one other than qualified? Okay. That's our identity. And when we have that identity, we have that value, then whether or not someone pays attention to us is not quite as big of a deal. And it's still going to be really hard to say goodbye to you guys, and I'm going to miss you a ton. But we're all going to be okay, because our identity is there. And we can be thankful for the gifts that we have, and the people that God puts in our lives. But when you leave, don't leave. But when you leave, we'll be okay. And when you're alone next year, when your friends are not around, when you're in a new place, when you're in a scary place, you're not alone. You'll be okay. And don't forget, we're all still here. We're just a phone call away. You can find us. If everybody destroyed their me monster or suppressed their me monster a little bit, everyone would still get the attention they crave. But it wouldn't be taking it from others. It would be giving it to each other. We'd all be happy. The world would be a better place. speaking of it being all about me, this might be a good time to move off from my chapel messages to some of you to my life skills class. I want to share this with all of you. I shared it with my life skills class last week. I think it's a valuable, applicable thing for us right now. So maybe this is your buffet item that you're going to cling to this morning. And it's the idea, I've talked about it in life skills. Mrs. A has talked about it several times in reentry. It's the idea of when you're saying goodbye, of building a raft. So briefly we're going to go over these topics of building a raft. R in raft is for, some of you know this, reconcile, reconciliation. Make sure that you make up with the people that that matter to you. Don't leave on a bad note. Don't start fights right at the end just because sometimes it's easier to say goodbye to somebody you're in a fight with. Be really careful about that. A stands for affirmation. Affirmation. You guys are getting tons of it this week and next week. The receptions, all the attention, the graduation. We're affirming you because we love you guys so much. Don't forget to take the time yourselves to affirm some other people as well. Maybe handsome and humble speakers and such. Take the time to say thank you and tell the people that are important to you what you appreciate about them. Write letters, say it to their faces, give them gifts, things like that. F stands for farewell. Say goodbye. Say goodbye to people, say goodbye to things, say goodbye to places, say goodbye to pets. Say goodbye. And I really think it would be great if a lot of you just took cameras around and just took pictures of everything. When I left ICI, I took pictures of everything. Took them with it, and then I could just revisit anytime I wanted to. Take your yearbook with you. T stands for think destination. Think destination. Look forward to what's next. Look forward to what's coming. It's going to be hard to just dwell on what we're doing here, but hopefully God has something good in store for you. Any of you don't know what that is yet? Try to have the faith that God is going to be with you, and He is going to have something good for you. Moving to this year, Ariel and Samuel joined the group, and that makes 36 seniors. And last semester I talked to you about failure. I told you that you're a failure, and I'm a failure. We're all failures. And I talked to you about one of my life mottos. When life gives you the choice between... No, that's not it. Paraphrase, my goal in life is to not be bad at anything. That's one of my life mottos. My goal in life is to not be bad at anything. I don't have to be the best at everything, but I don't like being bad at anything. And that becomes a problem because it doesn't allow for any failure in my life. And yet, one time, and I told you all kinds of stories about how I'm a failure. And I'm not going to tell you those this morning. It's on YouTube. If you want to go check it out, you can hear all my stories again. But I did talk to you about being really bad at baseball and striking out the ball on the tee. I told you a poem. We talked about how even the best fail. And, sports analogies all over the place about how terrible Michael Jordan was and, things like that. But, he was the greatest. But then we talked about what do you do with your failure? Because everybody fails, so how do you handle it? That's what matters. First, accept responsibility. Don't blame it on other people, but take responsibility for your failures. It's okay. In fact, it's admirable when you do that. Recognize the benefits of failure. Shows what doesn't work. Forces you to be creative. It prevents arrogance. Causes you to reevaluate, reflect what's important in life. And it allows you to refine your life. Seniors, you are going to fail. Soon. Michael Gomez? I'm not picking on him, but he said last week in Life Skills, he said to the seniors, he said, don't expect everything and all your dreams to come true. There are going to be things in your life that don't work out the way you planned. And he told the seniors in that class to let that grow you and let that help you learn more about yourself and more about God. Don't let it ruin you. It'll be okay. And of course, don't forget the gift that Christ offers us. For where we all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and we have all failed, He still gave His life for us. Sacrifice and full payment of our debt so that we may be forgiven for all our sins and all our failures. It's okay. This semester, I spoke, and we won't take long on this one because a lot of you were here anyway. So, I spoke on, it was the anti-Valentine's message. We didn't talk about true love and soulmates and things like that. I told you that it's bad etiquette to go to the bathroom Wait, let me rephrase that. It's bad etiquette to get up and walk over to the restroom while someone's speaking. And then I talked about decision making and the will of God. I talked about how it's dangerous when you are aiming for the center of God's will, and you think that there's this one right choice, but then you worry, if you miss that you are now going to be fully outside of God's will, and you will be living a secondary life, a second-class life. And we talked about 4 principles. And I hope some of you actually remember these, or this will be a quick review for you. The first principle of decision-making in the will of God is that where there is a command, we should obey. Where the Bible says to do something, do it. The moral will of God needs to be followed. But, the second thing, where there is not a command, God gives us the freedom to choose. Where there is not a command, God gives us the freedom to choose. That means college, your job, who to marry, who to date, whether to marry, all of those decisions fall in that category of free will. You can choose, and God will go with you in your choice. Third, where there is freedom to choose, God provides wisdom. That means you can pray, that God will help you with your choice. It means you can talk to people who will advise you and guide you, and you won't go alone. You won't be in that alone. And finally, fourth, once we have chosen what is moral and wise, we must trust the sovereignty of God to work in and through our choices. When we have chosen what is moral and wise, we must trust the sovereignty of God to work in and through our choices. That means once you've chosen, give it to God. Don't doubt it. He's going to be with you. Definitely don't doubt that with marriage, right? Don't choose a spouse, marry them, and then say, that's my soulmate. I'm outside of God's will. I'm going to divorce here and go there. No, God will work in and through your decision. I spoke one more time to you. It was last year. It was in May. We're going to end with this one. This was a hard message. The context of this message is that this happened, it was a couple of months actually after Carrie had her accident off the island. And the topic was, how do you handle when it feels like God isn't there for you? When things are going wrong and you can't figure out why. And I read Psalm 121 to you. I'm going to read it this morning. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. That's a great and encouraging verse, except that Carrie's foot slipped. And Carrie fell. And I still relive it from time to time, watching her go over the edge and thinking that I'm watching a friend die. And how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that the Bible says He will not let your foot slip, He will not let you fall, He will not let harm come to you, when Carrie almost died? And I had to struggle with that for months. And we talked about David, and we talked about Jesus, and we talked about how there were times in their lives when they cried out to God and said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? And I took solace in that. I felt like if some of the biggest names of the Bible can have those emotions and those struggles, then so can I, and so can you. I talked about the cartoon that I have back home. When I was in high school, I had a little cartoon strip. And it's a cartoon of a high school age boy. He's sitting in his room, and his room is just a disaster. It's just totally wrecked. And he's just sitting there staring off. And his mom comes in and says, I think he's grounded, by the way. I think that's why he's in his room, because he has to clean it. And his mom says, I think that if all you have to do is clean up your room and you can go, you can move past this, it'll be fine. That's all you got to do. And he says, yeah, Mom, but sometimes you just got to sit and look at the rubble for a little while first. Just got to sit and look at the rubble for a little while first. And so I took that to mean that it's okay, it's acceptable from time to time to just sit and say, what's going on? But at some point, you do got to get up and you got to start moving forward. And that's what David and Jesus did in those passages. The Psalms of Lament, David came back and he said, but Lord, you have been faithful to me. And of course, Jesus, the same thing. He came back to the faithfulness of God. And so that was my encouragement to you, and that is my encouragement to you, is to look back on God's faithfulness. Even when times are hard, even when you feel alone, remember the times that God has been faithful to you. And JP talked last year, I think, about stones of remembrance. And I've talked about fingerprints and the ways that God has revealed himself in our lives. I asked Carrie yesterday, what has been the result? What has happened in your life where God has shown himself in the circumstances since your fall? And she wrote back, and I had to take a break in the middle of her response. It was so long. I could have just read that this morning. There are just so many ways which God has shown his presence in her life and Josh's life after the fall. From the insurance company coming right in and paying for the evacuation, to the medical team that she had connections with in the past that did the surgery for her, to a little girl in her mom's class who came back to the Lord after hearing her story. God is with us even in the hard stuff. And in Psalm 121, the verb watching is in there about 5 times. He watches you. He's watching. He's watching. He's watching. God is always with us. So look for fingerprints. Collect and set up stones of remembrance for those hard times that are to come. I'm going to miss you guys like crazy. But as cheesy as this sounds, I take comfort in the fact that I'm going to see you all again. Some of you I'll see in a couple of years, but heaven's going to be great. You know? Heaven's going to be great. Right now I see this huge DA reunion. That's how I picture heaven. It's you. You guys are there. And we're together again. And in the meantime, God bless you. Keep in touch. We love you.